Hello and welcome to a new video on the Hackerish YouTube's channel. In this video, you are going to learn how to set up OWASP Webgoat and OWASP WebWolf in order to start experimenting and exploiting the OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities. So let's get started. OWASP Webgoat is a deliberately insecure web application to test Java-based applications against common web application vulnerabilities. It is a very well-maintained project and contains most of the OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities. Webgoat comes with another web application called OWASP WebWolf, which makes it easy for you to host malicious files, receive emails and HTTP requests from Webgoat, and it's really helpful and handy for testing things like out-of-band attacks. Both OWASP Webgoat and WebWolf are released as jar files, Docker images, and source code. So it's very convenient for our testing lab. This is a great opportunity to learn how Docker can be used to set up a lab and learn web application hacking. Because this is a vulnerable machine that we're going to install, it's bad practice to host it on your host machine. So I'm going to use a virtual machine where I will install all my software. And for that, I'm going to use VirtualBox, but you can also use your own favorite virtualization software, VMware, for example. So you can go to Downloads and then choose whatever distribution or operating system package you want, and just go ahead and download it. I already have it installed. We need a virtual machine inside VirtualBox. So what we can do is download and install Debian, but you can use whatever flavor of Linux you want. I personally prefer Debian. And I'm going to use the NetInstaller so that it's quicker for us to download it. So here we land on the network install from a minimal CD. And because we are going to use a 64 bits architecture machine, we're going to use AMT64. Let's save the file. Okay, now we're ready to go. Let's start by firing VirtualBox. Choose New. Give it your favorite name. And here we can just, it doesn't matter, but you can just choose Linux and 64 bits. Make sure you give it at least 1 gig of memory size. That way we can host all of our lab inside this machine without having any trouble. 12 gigs is fine. Continue. And just hit continue. Alright, so now we have our first machine configured. We need to give it the ISO file that we've downloaded. And choose a disk. It's in our downloads file. Here's Debian. Okay, so now let's start it. Choose the bottom one, hit OK. We're going to use an English language, territory United States. I'm going to use a key map of American keyboard. Default Debian. Domain name, we don't need it. Here you can type your root password, full name, username, and choose your password for the new user you just set. Before we set the password for the root user, but now we're setting a password for the hackerish user. I'm going to choose an Eastern time zone. Now we can just choose the guided wizard and write changes to disk. We're not going to use another CD, and we'll give it a emitter. We don't have any proxy, so just hit continue. If you're in a corporate network and you have a proxy, then you can set it there. We don't want to participate. So in the software selection menu, Make sure to uncheck the Debian desktop environment because we don't need it. We're just going to use SSH and connect to our box. So just hit space to uncheck it. And then using the arrow keys, go to the bottom, uncheck print server and check SSH server. And also make sure to have standard system utilities checked. Hit tab and then continue. And then just install the Grub bootloader in our newly created disk here, the second option. Okay, installation complete. Let's continue. And we land on login page. So here we can log in using the low-level user that we created. And we are on the box. So the first thing to do now is to configure the networking so that we can connect to this machine. If we hit IP space A, you notice that we have 10.0.2.15, which is the network interface of our box, but from our host machine we can't connect to it. So we need to set up a bridge to be able to access it from the host machine. So the configuration that we're going to do is to choose a bridged network adapter. So we go to Settings, Networks, and choose Bridged Adapter. And here you can choose whatever adapter you have with your LAN. In this case, I'm using Wi-Fi. Alright, let's start this machine and log in. Now, if we show our network interfaces, we see that we have a new IP address in our local network. So let's use this IP to connect to our machine from the host machine. Hit yes, and log in using our credential. Alright, so we've successfully connected to our lab machine where we are going to install our OWASP Top 10 training lab. I've included downloading and installing Java and running WebGoat and WebWolf in Java so that you know how to install Java on your machine. Knowing how to install packages is a good skill to have in your learning journey. It allows you to discover and experiment with new tools, especially with the increasing number of open source tools published every day. The full instructions are available on the blog, so make sure to go to thehackers.com. I have the link in the description box. So the first thing we need to do is to download the GDK version 11. Now let's unzip the archive and choose a directory. We don't have the directory userlib so we are going to create it using a privileged user. First, let's elevate our privileges. Then we can link our extracted Java binary. So we're doing that so that we can just type Java and then have it run. It means basically that user/bin/java is pointing to our binary which we downloaded. Now let's verify. Right, so you can see that we have OpenGDK version 11. Now we can just remove our archive and exit to our low-level user. So now we have Java installed. All we have to do is download the jar files relative to OWASP Webgoat and WebWolf and run them. We are going to the Webgoat GitHub project. And I choose the releases, and we're going to use the latest version. And here we can download both WebGoat and WebWolf. So to do that, I'm just going to copy the link and download it using wget. And we're going to do the same thing for WebWolf. So now all we have to do is run our two web applications. By default, WebGoat listens on just localhost. And because we need to reach this machine from another machine, in this case our host machine, we need our WebGoat to listen on all interfaces. We do that using the server.address and put 0.0.0.0. Okay, so it says here that it started. Now we just have to go to this IP address of our VM machine and use the port 8080 for our default WebGoat port, and then the path WebGoat, case sensitive. And voila, you have your WebGoat instance running on your VM. Let's do the same thing with WebWolf. So I'm going to use a new tab and do the same thing. SSH to our machine once more. And run java-jar with our WebWolf jar. And don't forget to set the address of the server to listen on all interfaces. Okay, we have WebWolf started. Same thing, we can just copy the IP address from here. And this time we're going to use the default WebWolf port, which is 9090. And the path WebWolf case sensitive. Congratulations, you have your WebWolf up and running. Docker has many advantages over using plain Java. I can't recommend it enough, not only in this OWASP Top 10 training series, but also in your overall hacking journey. In fact, you don't need to install and configure any dependencies. Plus, WebGoat and WebWolf are all run using one command, and Docker will help you to easily set up other applications in the future, so it's a good tool to have under your belt. So to install Docker, you can go to the Docker documentation page, and here you can see all the instructions that you can follow to install Docker. I've grouped all of them in the blog post linked in the description below, so feel free to give it a try. So let's go and install Docker in our machine. First, I'm going to just shut down our applications that we run using Java. Just hit Ctrl+C, and we'll do the same thing for WebGoat. Let's elevate our privileges and start installing Docker. We'll start by updating our repository, and we're going to install all the required dependencies. So we're going to just copy the commands without a sudo, or feel free to copy the commands from the blog post. Choose yes. Then we're going to add Docker official GPG key. Again, we're just going to remove the sudo because we're already a super user. And let's verify that the key is legitimate. You do this by running this command and verifying that the resulting key is 9dc8, etc. So it's 9dc8, and it finishes with 0ebf and cd88. Then let's add Docker to our repository. Once again, we update, and now we will have Docker Community Edition in our repository, so just go ahead and install it. Choose yes. Alright, now we have Docker installed. Let's just verify. So we don't have yet any images installed, but it's an indication that Docker has been successfully installed. Let's now exit from our super user. Now notice that when I run the same command, I get a permission denied, which is fine. So to fix this problem, all we need to do is add the hackerish user to the Docker group. So let's do that. So we're still having the problem. That's because you need to log out and log in again. And now when you hit Docker images, you successfully list the images that you have, which in this case is empty. So now all we need to do is to run the Docker image of WebGoat and WebWolf, which is available in the GitHub webpage. So here is our command. Notice that we need to set up the time zone to match the time zone of our machine. So what we can do here, so because I've installed my Debian machine in Eastern time zone, I need to actually make it match the time of my host machine so that we can test some JWT challenges in the future without any problem. So what I'm going to do is change our bash rc file. Add a time zone which matches our machine, so we're going to use Europe and Luxembourg. I need to source it so that it takes effect, and now we have the same date and time as our host machine. So now we can just go ahead and change the time zone and hit OK. Notice that we didn't have to specify the bind address of both WebWolf and WebGoat. And that's because in Docker, we expose the port 8080 in the host machine from the virtual machine. So now all we have to do is go to the IP address of our machine. For WebWolf, it's 1990, and for WebGoat, it's 8080. And there you have it. WebGoat now is running, but this time it's running on Docker. And the same thing goes for WebWolf. Congratulations, you've made another step towards practicing OWASP Top 10 vulnerabilities. In the next episode of this OWASP Top 10 training series, we will set up and configure OWASP Shop.